Hey, Faisal. This is Ron. How you doing? Doing good. I'm glad you jumped on. It's nice to talk to you after all these years. I feel like I
Yeah,
keep bumping into you everywhere.
I just saw it. I said, "Oh, okay, let me join." I haven't joined Spaces in a long, long time. So,
Well, I just kind of started doing these things a few days ago. This is being recorded. I'm gonna post them
okay.
up on Facebook or not Facebook. I don't even do Facebook. YouTube. And uh, anyway, I'm trying to, instead of talk about news and prices, I'm trying to talk about the technology and the industry and how all of this stuff is coming together and sort of what kind of changes are going to happen. I mean, I think all the financial markets are going to change over the next decade or less.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely think so. I think the one that really, um, I mean, XRP, etc., fine, but the Interledger protocol is the one that I'm really interested in.
Oh yeah, big time. There's a couple of things that the Ripple team did that really blew my mind, and the Interledger protocol, when they announced that, it like took my understanding of how to do a network of networks to a new high. Like I didn't see that coming.
Yeah, and I think Coil and the likes, they're doing a lot of work in this now. I mean, I can't talk about certain companies, but I know two other, let's say, Ripple or Ripple funded companies that are now, that have the money now and are actively, and also not just the money. Money is important nonetheless, but they also have the licenses. And that's the very important thing in the United States. They have the licenses in the US,
Yep.
including the bit license, and they are now working towards stitching together micropayments on micro wallets. They've also applied for or licenses elsewhere, albeit I'm not privy to that yet. But
So,
and that's based on the ILP. So that's the big one for me.
well, the Interledger protocol, I mean, that sent me over the edge on a learning curve. But it's brilliant. And the W3C adopted it. And then, correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't all the major browsers like Chrome and Firefox and uh, Safari and Internet Explorer or whatever they call that now, didn't they all a few years ago agree to adopt the ILP methods for in-browser payments?
I think they did, albeit I am not up to mark on that. Someone else maybe can shed some light on that. But I do know one thing, that a few months ago, well, let's say even 2019, 2020, traction was a huge issue. It still is. I mean, at the end of the day, I still can't pay for an article using small value payments in, let's say, New York Times or The Economist. I mean, those guys have yet to jump on board. But
Yeah.
traction now for networks where they have active traction, where they have active transactions, and are looking at sub $10, even sub $5 or $1 payments across the board, internationally and nationally within the US, that's coming there. So they have the traffic. It's now just a mere connection of the networks.
Mm-hmm.
But the biggest stumbling block is that even a lot of people just don't know how settlements are done. I mean, it's been described a lot in papers and so forth, but actually how ledger settlements are done, bank ledger settlements are done, and how you have to do all those. I mean, if you take an aggregate payment, right? If someone gives you $10,000 and say, "Hey, send this across to Australia," and that 10,000 has, maybe, let's say, I don't know, 500 payments inside it. How do you handle that from an AML point of view? The Interledger protocol doesn't at present address that. And these are the kind of things that you need to look at, and they are very serious things to look at. For example, the FATF travel rule, etc. But I think we're getting there eventually.
Well, let me come back to that because I'd love to pick your brain. I feel like I know a good bit, but I don't know as much as you do. But somebody wanted to say something.
Just to say hi to everyone. Yeah, I don't know if that's been mentioned, but about Interledger, I remember like a few years ago, the Apple actually announced that they're going to implement it. I don't know if that's been done or not, but there was like 2 or 3 years ago, there was a press release about it. And also, is the Interledger is been created by people from Ripple, right? But it's been just give away to people like for free. So that's quite actually awesome, to be honest. And no one's talking about it. The fat around the Ripple company is incredible, but the input they have in a crypto space and all payments space is huge. So,
Well, I think it is one of the probably best strategic moves I've seen him make. It took me a while to digest why I ended up with that opinion. But if you think about the whole mission of creating an internet of value, you have to create, it's an internet of networks, right? So you have to network these networks together. There's not a token to invest in. So, maybe that part's not as exciting, but I personally am genuinely interested in seeing an internet of value created. I think it's just good for all of humanity. So I think it was brilliant. And then they gave it to the W3C. I kind of think Bill Gates had something to do with it because he popped up around the 2015 Ripple era. And then that's kind of shortly after that when the ILP popped up. And Faisal knows a lot of... Faisal's a wonderful resource to have on the call for any of this kind of questions. I mean, I'd love to pick your brain.
Yeah, the Moja Loop is actually backed by Gates Foundation, so they works with Coil, which actually works on Interledger. So that's kind of the connection.
And Moja Loop is basically started out as a copy paste of ILP, and then I think they tweaked it a little bit with a focus on the African continent.
Do you have any practical examples or case studies that you may know where ILP has actually stitched together two disparate payment networks that are actually up and running?
No, I haven't. I had corresponded with Adrian the other day, and he kind of indicated that it's mostly just people testing. I don't know that it's real live payments. I think Coil is probably done the most of the work that's been done because they're trying to do the micro payments, and you can't do that.
Considering the co-author of ILP is there, the CEO there, so yes, I guess they will have a head start. But I've been trying to find an actual pragmatic example of someone saying, okay, you know what, even on a small scale, we're moving, let's say, $100,000 a month or $100,000 a day or $10,000 a day on these two disparate networks that are connected through ILP. I don't have an example of that yet.
There was... Go ahead.
Hello everyone, how are you? I'm from Pakistan. I have no knowledge about this kind of currency. Can you please guide me about the topics and the theme of the space?
Sorry, I didn't fully understand that.
I joined your space, but I have not complete knowledge about the agenda or theme. So whatever your discussion topic, kindly guide me.
So just mostly around Ripple, the XRP ledger, interledger protocol, so networking these blockchains and bank ledgers together, effectively creating the Internet of Value, which is going to take a few years, realistically. But yeah.
Okay. I can understand. But with the emergence of technology, am I right?
I'm sorry. Say that again.
I think so. You are discussing about the business and finance with the emergence of technology. Am I right?
Yeah, but there's no merchants. And this is just for people interested in understanding how things work, and maybe gaining some insight to see where what the coming years are going to bring. And Faisal, there was an example that they did. I think I forget, it was Evan or Stefan. It might have been Stefan. Did several years ago. I can see it in my head like a visual, but they had like a red ledger and a blue ledger, and they ran an ILP payment. It was simply for demo purposes, but he presented it, I think, at a something or another in German.
Probably Stefan, right? He did the earlier ones, and circa 2018, 2019, a lot of the podcasts were dedicated on the ILP and how the ILP works, and they did do quite a few demonstrations and even presentations on that. But I don't know of an actual up and running network that is doing it. That would be the cool thing, because if you don't use it as a bridge currency, but if you take two disparate networks and you don't use these quote unquote wrappers, or even if you do use wrappers, so, like you have a Solana network and, I don't know, the traditional Ethereum network and I don't know, an M-Pesa network in Kenya, and you're trying to do a transaction and you're using ILP. So now you have two disparate blockchains, you have a fiat solution. How are you doing the settlement? How are you doing the AML KYC? How are you doing the reporting? How are you doing things like LI, which is a lawful intercept for law enforcement agencies, etc., and reporting, cross-border reporting, etc. That's what I haven't seen.
So I think you haven't seen it because I don't think it's been done yet. ILP abstracts away most of that functionality, which I think is one of the genius moves, because it leaves the business opportunity open for making a market between two different ledgers. So it could be much in line with like a current correspondent bank business model. And then the bank basically, they obviously make a spread for making a market, but then they or their partners handle the KYC, the licensing, the AML, and all of that. So it leaves the role open for existing institutions to network together, still provide a value add, to the interledger protocol network, and play a legitimate role that just must be performed. And you have both the licensure and then also the provision of liquidity.
Well, I'm not too concerned about liquidity. I think the market makers will come once, build it and they will come, kind of a scenario over there. But I think I'm more concerned about taking an actual network and saying, okay, let's run it, but let's also be compliant. Not just from a point of view of licensure, because obviously if you're going to run it on a cross-border scheme or even a domestic or a national payments platform, you have to be licensed. And I think they will be. But I'm more concerned about what happens when you start aggregating networks, because the first use case would probably be an aggregation, where one network that already has traffic is looking at a seamless integration into another network that already has traffic over there. And these two networks have not been, in the traditional sense, been able to exchange value for whatever reasons. And here comes on the ILP bridge, which is going to stitch them. So barring the settlement process, which obviously is still going to be based on some agreed correspondent type arrangement, The question is, how do you handle payments? How do you handle real-time payments? Are they going to be aggregate payments? Are they going to be, elementary payments? By aggregate, are they going to be batch payments, or are they going to be all live payments? And if so, how do you handle, or how do you propose to handle rules and rule sets where you have different reporting requirements, or where you have different requirements? Because I think it's not the technical aspects of or the market making aspects that's going to stall these projects. Not stall them, delay them. Stall is a wrong word. My apologies. Delay them. What is definitely going to delay these projects is the understanding and making these crossovers or these bridges in such a manner that they're compliant with the recommendations that are out there, specifically the Hawkeyes being the financial regulators that are going to be watching.
So I think what you're talking about is something that I'm keenly interested in, and I wouldn't claim to be an expert on it, but it's the connector role in the ILP schema, and the connector is effectively a market maker, and that's where the routing functionality is something I'm particularly interested in. But the market maker, so you were using the term aggregator. I would replace that with an interledger protocol connector. And, traditionally a market maker, like a specialist on the New York Stock Exchange, they only have 2 units of value they're making a market in, dollars and whatever equity they're making a market in. But with the connectors acting more like an ISP, they have multiple. They'll ultimately end up the way I envision things unfolding, connecting multiple networks, with each network likely having its own denomination, whether that be a balance at bank, insert country, or blockchain, like whatever the value denomination is.
Yeah, absolutely. But in a true sense, what you're talking is, or what everyone knows, is a financial router, right? If there's a network router, which we all know, Cisco, whatever, Juniper, etc. But if there was a financial router, this is exactly what it would do.
Yeah, and I think that's that. Correct? Is that not what you were kind of hinting at? Or am I hearing you wrong?
No, I'm saying that I don't see a problem in that. I think the ILP is a financial router. I'm just saying that when you actually go and implement it, I think we will be looking at the protocol itself, and then we're looking at and saying, what, we are missing a few parameters here. We're missing a few fields here, or we're missing a few information packets here, or data sets here that would make it truly compliant. Because right now, I think compliance would be the huge issue, not the actual value transfer and settlement. That's going to happen. Like I said, there are obviously examples, one which we will not mention, and I think you know what I'm talking about. Those are going to come into play. But in addition to that, if any other network wants to start joining, because the first 2 ones that join, a third one will come in, right? If you and I agree to do ILP, and we are, let's say, halfway decent payment networks, someone else would want to join in. And when 3 are there, then the 4th one would come in, and so forth. And at some point in time, you're going to have multiple jurisdictions. You're trading, you're doing correspondent banking, so to speak, on an ILP, and reporting and compliance are going to be the most important factors. And in my limited opinion, again, I say limited opinion, I don't think so. These are factors that have been taken well into account by those who are attempting it.
So, the ILP, in my opinion, is safe from all your worries, because it's currency agnostic. You don't have to tie to any kind of currency. You only have to run a node, a gate between 2 assets of whatever type. You just need to be compliant exchange in the country your company operates. It isn't that complicated, at least in Europe.
No, even in Europe. So let me tell you how two settlement or any two financial institutions settle. The only institutions that are exempt from having a correspondent tie-up agreement are banks. So you can have a bank in Venezuela, a small credit union, you can have a bank in, I don't know, in Burkina Faso, and they can exchange value in whatever, and there'll be a correspondent bank offering these services. But when you have a non-banking financial institutions, of which there are more than, I don't even know, 30, 40, 50,000 institutions in the world that are licensed, you cannot just, let's say, if I want to exchange money with you, you are licensed in, let's say, Sweden, I'm licensed in, let's say, I don't know, Brazil. You and I just cannot, even if we have the ability to, cannot just exchange value. We're not allowed to. And this is true for all the 220 countries and territories in the world. You have to have something called a correspondent tie-up agreement, where you and I have to agree on a certain rule set. We have to do due diligence with each other. Once we have done that, once we've signed a contract, once we're compliant, only then we can exchange value. And even then, when we exchange value, we have to determine what sort of value we exchange. I'm not talking about the currency set itself. I'm talking about things like, are we adhering to the FATF travel? Are we adhering to the group's limits that we have? In the industry, it's called Group 0, 1, 2, and 3. So Group 0 is just a registered user. Group 1 is like a small transaction. Group 2 is a higher transaction. Group 3 is a very high transaction. And are we sending across the KYC data? And if we are,
KYC, yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. Yeah, cool to know. All said.
So these are the problems.
And can I have a question? Isn't
Sure.
a bit different when you do business to business? So you have to, one company gives an invoice, VAT included in Europe at least 23%. Value-added tax, and we need to meet all what you said in our country because we don't, buy and sell currency from the open market. We do business direct. That, at least in my opinion, it should be different than just exchanging value in exchange.
So
this that's what the ILP would be probably a good fit.
ILP is actually right now probably the best candidate that is out there. I do not know of any other candidate that can even come close. But like even for example, if you're doing a business-to-business transaction from Paris to Buenos Aires, and you're sending information out and invoice out, how do you handle your GDPR rules? How do you handle your compliance rules? So these are the kind of questions, like I'm telling you. I don't think so technically it's an issue. I don't think so settlement point is an issue. All I'm saying is from all these protocols, I think compliance is going to be the issue.
So Faisal, let me take a swing at this, and this is just my thoughts. I don't know one way or any better than anybody else, but couple of years ago, I wrote a thing called a little write-up. It's on Medium called How Expool. And the conclusion at the end was what I called distributed pathfinding. And in the course of this conversation, I'm thinking about combining some of those thoughts with RippleNet. So the idea behind distributed pathfinding was you would have, say, I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, I've never gotten confirmation one way or the other, that when, I don't know what they call it now, but when Ripple used to sell their service offering xCurrent to a bank, that they would effectively give that bank its own standalone Ripple D or XRPL ledger, which has inside of it the pathfinding / routing functionality. And so I think RippleNet is effectively just like correspondent banking, but, better, faster, cheaper. You've got the two-way communication with the KYC. If you signed on to RippleNet, you've agreed with, rule set. I forget what they call it, but the governance contract for if you need to pull back a payment and that kind of thing. And then, so say I'm a bank and I have 5 correspondent banking relationships, and you're a bank and you have 5 correspondent banking relationships. We can represent the terms of those 5 relationships on my ledger as, with whatever the costs for each individual relationship, as well as on your ledger. And then let's pretend there's a third person in the same situation. And then when a payment gets sent through, each individual ledger can perform its own routing. So when you extrapolate that sort of up into the interledger protocol schema, you've got each of those banks effectively like becomes a connector. And so they're just going to shove the value off down whatever the cheapest path is to the next guy, who's going to then shove it off to the next person with the cheapest path. And so by having all these individual, bank ledgers doing routing function within their own, they're basically acting like ILP connectors. You find the cheapest path to the end. Where that comes into some trouble is there is no sort of global routing table. That's why I called it distributed pathfinding. So I can only shove it off to people I'm connected with. That doesn't
Of course.
mean best connections. It just means this is the best connection I've got.
So let me take your example. So let's say we are talking 10, right? So number 1 is the originator and number 10 is the sink, the payout. And 1 gives it to 2, 2 gives it to 3, and so on and so forth, just for purposes of simplicity. My question is, if the first 3 banks happen to be in the United States and the last 3 banks, 8, 9, and 10 happen to be in, let's say, China, and the remaining banks are routing through different countries, and a packet is going for 6 cents or $6, let's say $6 is being sent across. My question is, when it arrives at number 4, bank number 4, is that value, that information being sent across, is that going to be stopped? We looked at all the global anti-money laundering lists, OFAC lists, PEP screening, and then go forward? Or are you just sending the value across and you're not going to do any screening? When it goes to number 7, number 6, or number 10, is that process repeated again? In fact, my question is the process going to be repeated 9 times because it's going to go from 1 to 10?
The best thing that I can think of, and I'm just sort of thinking this out loud, actually might end up being a role where XRP Ledger plays a role. Because if bank, number 1, 2, and 3, say are exchanging, say they're all US. So they've got their US KYC, what have you, AML, yada, yada. And then it makes a hop internationally. So it goes through the XRP ledger. And then, but those 2 banks, if they're RippleNet banks, RippleNet users, you're going to have that governance framework that they've agreed to. And then if it hops another country border, and it goes back through the XRP ledger, again, the RippleNet governance agreement is going to the best of my knowledge, I mean, I've never read the agreement. Not privy to it. But to the best of my knowledge, like every time in that case, you would be hopping through the XRP ledger from RippleNet Bank to RippleNet Bank, then you would be maintaining a KYC compliance string across, any number of hops. Am I getting ahead of myself, or does that make any sense?
No, that makes sense. So basically you're saying number 1 does a clean check, gives it to number 2. Number 2 says, okay, I've got a clean check from number 1. And I'll trust it, and I'll give it to number 3, and they say, oh yeah, you're all on the same network, we are cool. But what happens when you slip outside that network? What happens if you come to a new network? Then what happens? Do you go through this rigorous KYC check all over again? If that's the case, if it gets flagged at number 5 and the payment needs to be stopped, then what happens? These are the kind of questions that are really going to be coming up, because if it's pure value exchange, there's no, in my mind, I think that's perfect. That's running. We're able to do that today. But when we have handover to disparate networks, these networks by law would be mandated to run certain, sanction screening. For example, if you have a bank in Luxembourg and a transaction is happening for $6 originating on a Ripple net in the US, and this Luxembourg bank gets it, or let's say it's not even a bank, it's a non-banking financial institution that receives $6, it has to do an OFAC check. And for $6, how much of an OFAC check are you going to do? It has to do EU screening check, has to do UN sanctions check, has to do the Luxembourg black and white list check, has to do an EU AML5D list that they may have, etc., before it passes it on. That's the kind of problems I'm talking about. These are the kind of things that may slow the network down or may require a rethink of the players that are going to be programming into it.
So, I don't know, is the honest answer. I think when you start looking at the streaming payments, I know that if you're sending, say you've got $1 and that or $6 you want to send through. So you start sending pennies, right? The penny switching thing. If some of those pennies start going through a route where, you don't have a clean line of compliance, then I would think they're not going to get forwarded on, which means that the Interledger protocol will recognize that route as it didn't complete to the end user. So you quit sending value down that route.
Yeah, very much possible. I think it's so our common friend, we were, I guess, in many ways debating if this is a question of reputation, a network reputation question. And if it is it built into the network, and is it built into the transaction? Or when the transaction is, let's say, cut off, meaning the transaction is not tied down or anchored down to a specific it's a free roaming packet. Does it have all this information contained within it when it's making a choice in the least cost routing network?
Again, I'm just thinking out loud. I would think if I'm running an ILP connector, I'm not going to put my regulatory compliance on the line and connect with somebody who's not compliant up to my at least at to minimum of my standards, or for whatever their domestic jurisdiction is. So I feel like the reputation would almost get just baked in by the connectors themselves not connecting with disreputable or unregulated connectors.
So imagine if we are mildly considered knowledgeable in this area. Imagine going to a state examiner or a financial regulator that has no idea of how ILP or any of these protocols work, and trying to explain to them that a transaction originating on bank 1 and now we are sitting on bank 7 is actually compliant, because all the compliant wrappers are actually contained in the data header or in the data and the header fields of it, and they are, as you say, baked in. And try to convince that financial regulator that this is a kosher payment going through. Not going to be an easy task.
Oh dear, no. Oh man, that's a 6.
But that's going to happen. See, this is the thing. You can get away with it for 12 months. And why do I say 12 months? Because at some point in time in the 12 months, you're going to have an audit. And in the audit, a transaction is, they randomly ask for everything. And they're going to ask, well, how are these transactions coming? Oh, it's coming through the ILP. Okay. Who's the originator? Oh, it's bank 1. Yeah, but that's 6 hops away. How do you know that this transaction has not been, it's wrapped and locked in the ILP protocol, wrapper, etc., etc.? How does that work? And then you have to explain them everything.
I'm not sure. I know that there's two different, and I might be getting ahead of myself here, but I know there's like atomic settlement and universal settlement. And I know atomic settlement is sort of the full path is predetermined and it can't complete unless everything is there. And I would think that would be able to backtrace. So if anything's audited, you can backtrace it. Universal settlement, which I believe is how ILP, or maybe ILP has both options. I forget, but maybe you know. I would think you would still be able to backtrace the payment. And so then if there was ever suspicion and authorities needed to check on something, they should at least be able to pinpoint the suspicious transaction and backtrace it through all the hops.
Before everyone else falls asleep on this space, let's just talk about something else in the ILP.
Actually, that's quite educational. I'm not the, I would say, the regulations and all this stuff you're talking about is not my good side. So it's good to listen people who are actually expert on that.
I'm not an expert. I just happen to dabble in the space. I don't know who an expert in this field is. Probably, I mean, there are definitely experts in this thing, but I'd love to hear some other viewpoint of the ILP.
Well, that's definitely a good point of view to see how the adoptions has not easy task to do. Actually, it's not easy thing to do. All these regulations and rules must be met, and it's not just the way how most of the community think with the even RippleNet adoption.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? Anyone can set up a node if they're knowledgeable enough. And once they have a node, they can set up themselves with a wallet and have value, start exchanging it for purposes of, let's say, educational learning. But when you have a real life company that has and moves money and is licensed and is regulated, then these are the actual problems, because the CFO, the CEO, the CTO, the CIO, they all become irrelevant until you hear about someone called the CCO, the Chief Compliance Officer. Until the Chief Compliance Officer does not sign off on that project, nothing is going to move. Can you imagine being a head of a company, let's say, that moves up, let's even talk something small. You're moving $100,000 a month, which is nothing. And the Chief Compliance Officer does not give his or her consent. Do you think this chief executive of that company or the CEO of that company is going to say, forget her, forget him, we'll just go ahead and do it? No way. Because on a very good day, if you violate the law, the payments money transmission law, you get fined. On a normal day, you go to jail. So these are the questions that have to be asked, right? It's not a technical issue. I can say this again and again and go blue in the face. It's not a technical issue. It's an issue of compliance and coming to an agreement with standards.
So that's the reason why the MoneyGram, they shit their pants and they just walk off and left all this project in Ripple.
I mean, I don't know that anybody can speak to what they made their decisions on. Jay, would you like to speak up? I know you have some amount of knowledge in this regard.
Just to listen. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. Hey Faisal, hey Don, and hey everyone in the chat. Just listening listening to your conversation, what's going on. Nothing specifically from my side. Obviously, we have the expert here. So, just listening through the chat.
Okay, cool.
So I think on the MoneyGram, if I were to speculate, I can't even say elaborate, but speculate. I think it's a reputation issue, right? It's a reputation issue of not knowing well enough what might happen, what might play out. And being a public limited company, I think the board of directors have a fiduciary duty towards the shareholders. Not knowing or getting entangled or seemingly entangled as a partner of a company that is going to go head to head with the United States government, Department of Treasury, or the SEC, or whatever it may be, is something they didn't like. So they thought, you know what, it's $150 million, $200 million, whatever the deal size may be, right? Let's just take an exit and walk away. And both sides decides to do that. And in the meantime, Stellar came in. I mean, how will this play out eventually? I don't know. But the one thing that really bothers me and has been bothering me for a long, long time is why at the very first instant, and I'm talking circa 2014 or 15, when I think at that time, one of the state, was it FinCEN or someone else, chided Ripple, the company, Ripple Labs at that time,
Yeah, it was
for not having money, for not having money transmission licenses. If Ripple had the money, they could have just easily have applied for it, you know? And once they had applied for it, then they would have been able to use those licenses for all their network partners and cover them under an agent agreement and say, hey, you're good to go.
I believe they actually did. So funny, when I first found Ripple, instantly I knew, okay, FinCEN's getting involved. Like this isn't, and it was about a year or two later, FinCEN came in. I think that was 2015, and then I believe right around there, right before there, was when Ripple started up their they have a subsidiary registered in New York State, where they got the bit license, and it's a registered MSB. I could be wrong on that, but I'm pretty sure it's a registered MSB. Like XRP2, I think is what it's called.
Oh, that's pretty interesting. I never knew that Ripple had a license. I check the databases regularly, but I will check. You said XRP2? That was the name?
I believe it's XRP2. It's a wholly owned subsidiary of Ripple.
I
And I
you're
think
right, Karma.
they were one of the first people to get the bit license. I mean, I think they helped write the laws for the bit license. And then they hired the guy that wrote them and brought him in-house.
Wow, never knew that. Always learn something. You know who would be an amazing person to bring onto one of these spaces? Is Crypto Eerie.
I could tag her real quick. Let me see. She's great. She when I first saw her videos, when she first started, I could tell right off she had some financial acumen. And yeah, hang on a second.
She's plugged in. Yeah.
Yeah, coming back to the MoneyGram, actually, is it like Ripple invested in MoneyGram when they were actually just lagging behind the old market, isn't it? They were far behind with their financial situation was actually far worse than after the Ripple investment. So I don't remember how much Ripple put into MoneyGram, but that was like loads of money. And then I remember their shares; they just went straight up after that. So that's why I found out that their move to turn back from Ripple quite awkward. So,
well, I mean, MoneyGram had that Ant deal going on, remember, from China. So if you buy MoneyGram, you don't just get the licenses in the United States, you get licenses, I don't know, 60, 80, 90, 100 countries where MoneyGram is operating. And that's a huge thing, right? Rather than building out something yourself over the next couple of, let's say, 8 to 10 years, You go buy a company that already has the licenses, has already been up and running, has all the things in play, and you simply assume a seat on the board, and eventually you take control and you inculcate your technology, etc. The Ant deal never happened because of the opposition that it was a Chinese-owned company, etc. That fell through. Then Ripple came in, and of course, Ripple could have easily invested into it because the problem with MoneyGram is that the market cap may be low and you can buy the company low, etc. But they still had $1 billion worth of debt that needed to be paid off. So now with the market capitalization of the kind of the crazy capitalizations that we have right now, a company like Ripple could have easily sold a few XRPs and paid that debt off and be the owners of MoneyGram. Why they didn't do it? Why didn't I don't know, Solana do it? Why didn't Polkadot do it? Why didn't Binance not do it? It just baffles me.
Well, Faisal, if I remember, so when FinCEN came in to Ripple, and I think it was 2015, shortly after that, they put out some guidance, and it was brief guidance, but they articulated, gosh, I don't remember the terms, but I think it was like 3 separate kind of tiers of roles. And one of those roles was effectively got classified much like a Facebook, like a platform company. So, you're not responsible for the content that the end users post or transmit through the network. And I think Ripple, once you step out of like where Ripple is selling software to folks that might be responsible for KYC, AML, the rest of the regulations better than I do, but just responsible for the regulations. If Ripple were to pull that function in, they would start straddling and being in both classifications. And so I think that if I'm understanding right, I think that they kind of chose to just stick with, hey, we just run a platform, we sell software in to banks, banks are the custodian layer, banks are the regulatory layer, and we're just really a platform software provider. And so I can see
that's the right assumption. They wanted themselves to be a technology company, but the problem came in when they bought their XRP token, right? For purposes of bridge, because that is where you are basically taking custody of an asset. Custody of an asset makes you a money transmitter, and when you're a money transmitter, then you need to be licensed. Their goal was somehow that our partners are already licensed, so we are selling it to them, and they're the ones trading in it, and we should be absolved of any such responsibility of us being a money transmitter, and that was not the case.
That's a good point. I hadn't really thought about this, but when I wrote that article I was telling you about the How X pool, well, that was a series. I think it was like the 3rd or 4th of a series, because it all started when payment channels came along. And then I was like, hold on, we can use these for loans. And then, but if Ripple is loaning XRP, not only does it create capital efficiency, because the bank or the MSB or the exchange, whatever you want to call it, who's responsible for the regulatory compliance, not only are they not having to lay out capital to buy the XRP, they can just, borrow it and make a spread. That would also, I would think, insulate Ripple from having to be that compliant. It like I was just saying, that would prevent them from putting a foot in both classifications. They can stay in the platform classification. We just lent this stuff out. They let the exchange deal with it and be compliant. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. But I think you've shaken the hornet's nest, which is the United States government. It'll be really, really interesting to see the outcome. I, for one, am not very optimistic, even though they have a great bloody team. You know, the United States of late has been putting out really, for lack of a better word, and no disrespect here to anyone, just set in light humor, verdicts that are not, let's say, of the popular opinion. So it'll be interesting to see how this plays out, and if it goes negative or if it goes south, what the repercussions are going to be with other coins and so forth is something that needs to be evaluated.
So, what do you guys think about the Ripple versus SEC case? And in theory, then that might be the battle about the Ripple escrow, because as we know, the globally, like outside the US, RippleNet is evolving, and the ODL platform as well. So the outside the US, the banks are keen to use it, but all this war chest in escrow, maybe someone wants to put their hands on it. What do you reckon?
I think, and I've said this before, that if Ripple's doing line of credit and they're lending XRP, that within the framework of XRP ledger, strictly, kind of gives them the opportunity or the position or role of being like a central bank. That's the end of that point. Second point, it would be completely insane to burn the XRP. I mean, that just makes absolutely no sense from any point other than people on Twitter.
My point wasn't to burn them, but to take the custody of it.
Well, that's the third point, is unless the, well, really, I guess the Federal Reserve, or I guess maybe the Treasury, but it'd be more appropriate for the Federal Reserve. But I don't see how the Federal Reserve would be able to take custody of it. But unless they really understand the big picture, which is much.
I have to pop off. My battery's about to die. I just didn't want to be rude, but excellent talking to you guys. I hope you guys continue the conversation. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Faisal.
Thank you very much.
Unless they see the big picture and want to use it in the same way that the Federal Reserve uses its balance sheet for monetary policy purposes, I don't know what they would want to do with it. I mean, what would they do? Dump it on the market if they don't get like what's happening? Or like get the potential use case of it? I don't know. I don't think it's about the escrow. I think it's just about maybe politics. I don't know.
Holding innovation.
Well, I just want to jump on here. Didn't Stella actually burn half of their supply? Can someone just confirm that?
Yes, they did.
Okay, and their value didn't actually increase like they thought it would. Am I correct in saying that?
Yep.
So, I mean, historically, burning the supply wouldn't necessarily be a good thing. Obviously, if they're keeping it in escrow, I think that we do not understand the amount of money that's actually going to come into XRP. And I think just from retail investors not understanding how much money actually moves between the banks, the central banks, whatever the situation may be. And I think they are fully aware of that. And, I think that the space is actually going to explode. I mean, if you look at the Forex market, you've got, 5 trillion a day traded by retail and institutions just, on trading. That's not necessarily in terms of their Nostro and Vostro stuff. So if you have to get that market and have it run on XRP, who's to say? I just think that we don't actually understand the size of the market just yet, and they do.
I mean, I'd kind of agree with that sentiment. I think this is massive global market, and then and that's just using historical statistics. Think about when the internet came along. The amount of information that now flows around the world is orders of magnitude more than it was pre-internet. And if we're looking at an internet of value, I think, yeah, you've got a big chunk of the existing value exchange as a potential market size. But then when you consider all these micro payments and stuff that's going to come along once enabled, the amount of value that's going to flow around the world, I think, will just grow exponentially. So it's even more than what historical numbers would suggest, in my opinion.
I mean, one of the things that we have to think about is, 10 years from now,
I think
what
you said.
are we going to be using as our global reserve? Are we still going to be saying, Ethereum is coupled against the dollar and we're judging it on a dollar, or will we be judging it on an XRP basis? Why I say that is because if all the banks are using it, and XRP becomes your global reserve in a sense, and your measure of worth in terms of a CBDC standpoint, will we not be pricing things as to how much it is against XRP, whether you're using a coin to do it? But I'm just thinking of how far can it go, because I don't think we actually can fathom it. If it does go the way that we think it is, and it is the one, why would that not be the case?
Well,
Hello.
I think the term that in the central banking circles that I hear is that we're moving into a, quote, multipolar world. So I think you'll still have USD as a global reserve. The euro will probably rise to a global reserve. I expect the Chinese currency will ultimately rise to a global reserve. If XRP joined those ranks, I think that's kind of the pinnacle. Like, I don't see XRP, I don't buy into this whole one world currency, because you just reintroduce the whole problem with centralization, aka the US dollar being the significant, 70% of the global exchange. Like, that's a centralization problem. The whole goal of blockchain and distributed ledger technology is to address that issue. So if you reintroduced a cryptocurrency, any of them, Bitcoin, XRP, doesn't matter, as like sort of a global reserve, then I think you're taking, 2 steps forward and 4 steps back. Did that make any sense?
Yeah, but what if you, because the US dollar is tied to the country, right? But if XRP would be distributed along all the globally around the countries, right? It would be like a supranational currency. Is that there will be still the case? I remember a few years ago there was a program. I don't remember the name of it, but there was James Rickards in it. The Goldback, the famous Goldback, and the others financial guys, and they were talking about crypto. And one of them said something interesting. Then what Vance mentioned. Then he presumed, and in the future, most of the currencies will be traded against XRP. He mentioned Ripple, but that's how they back then they were calling XRP. So also, I would like to refer to the previous thoughts about the future potential. You mentioned how the future payments will be, will grow, and you compare it to the early internet. And I think the African continent will be the huge part of that revolution. That's why the Majaluk and Gates foundations are focusing on that. So the unbanked people will be, big part of the growing, payments system. So.
Yeah, I think you're kind of along the right path. I mean, I don't know, but if you think about if decentralization, presumably I look at decentralization kind of like diversification. Like if you look at the math, it's just better to diversify instead of have like everything in one asset or one global reserve currency. The euro in itself, in its own right, is decentralized across a bunch of currencies or a bunch of countries. It's one currency, but there's a lot of different economies backing that currency. And with the African thing, I know because I've been following the China stuff for a long time. China's big in Africa. And then I have another friend of mine who's an anthropologist. He's been going over there for almost 30, 40, 50, 40, something, almost 50 years. And I have not had this conversation with him, but I will. But I'm curious with the Bill and Melinda Gates and the Mojo Loop project, if, when the colonial powers came in, they just sort of drew lines on a map and they put, half of a culture in one country and the other half in another country, or maybe they split them up amongst 3 countries. And then they were like, oh, yeah, you got to use this country's money. And it just makes all sorts of friction. And so what I want to ask him is if that friction is lowered to essentially nothing, might the cultural adhesion be able to overcome the geographical national barriers? I don't know if anyone wants to speak up.
Sorry, I'm coding alongside and listening to you. Have you read what was the guy's name? Keynes. I don't remember his name, but Maynard Keynes, the main architect of post Second World War economist. Keynes.
Yeah, you're talking about John Maynard Keynes.
John Maynard, obviously, I sometimes forget major names. John Maynard Keynes. I was reading some of his thoughts and books or extracts when I was studying history, and I remember his idea about bank ore.
Yes.
The bank gold. So this idea was obviously impossible, was crazy these days when he invented that. But shortly, the best way to describe this idea of Bancor is Ripple logo, where each of those 3 big bulbs can stretch outside, they can grow, they can shrink. But most important is that the pressure in all of the, let's say, of the circles will stay always the same, and those pipes inside is the Bancor, which will deflate your internal CBDC currency or deflate. If your country has problems and your currency, your CBDC, will lose value, you will have better and cheaper services, workers, construction, coal, whatever, petrol, because, and in this time, you will be better place for investment from other sides of the planet, and they will, equalize the pressure in the whole system. That's how when I discovered XRP and I had my aha moment, that was exactly the time when I recalled John Maynard Keynes' brilliant, crazy idea, because it wasn't possible back then. There couldn't be, liquid asset, which as we discussed yesterday or day before yesterday, in XRP, it doesn't matter except of the big markets ahead, the big future to handle multi-trillion dollars or forex kind of volume. But if without considering that, the price of XRP doesn't matter for sending value. It just simply doesn't matter, except of the quantity needed for big guys, big boys. But it doesn't matter if you are sending $100 worth of dollars, because in 5 to 6 seconds, on the other side, you can sell this XRP on your exchange and get whatever euro, whatever is what it currently weights, quote, is worth. So this is for in my opinion the bank or implementation working for almost 10 years. And this pathfinding stuff only is one of the brilliant mechanisms which facilitates that.
Yeah, I think you kind of describe. So I'm a very visual person, and so I think of a lot of these markets as like a whole bunch of balloons that are all kind of tied to a pressure gauge, I guess, in the middle.
Yeah.
And you really did kind of describe. I've never articulated this well enough that I wanted to share it with anybody.
Imagine it like balloons with air. So if you press one of the Ripple's logos balloons, the two other will get bigger.
Yes.
But soon, when you release this balloon, so you put your interest rates, let's say, lower, the two other balloons will push the pressure in your balloon, and all the system will still keep the pressure, distributed.
Yeah, I mean, you even use the word pressure, which is exactly the way I think about it. And I think of the routing function or the pathfinding function as that pressure regulator.
That's the pressure regulator, yeah, because it does it for you. You don't even have to know the guys who will give you the pressure or release the pressure, depending on your CBDC inside, strength, market's strength, whatever.
But
Well, it's nice.
sorry, guys, but this is the question, because we're all talking about price. As retail, we're just worried about price. And for them, they're not. And David put a tweet out saying it doesn't matter about the price of XRP, but it actually operates better at a higher price than at a low price, because of obviously being a higher price, the price won't fluctuate as much with the volume that gets moved. So I get what you're saying, and at the same time.
But yeah. Obviously, just wanted to extract the price out of the equation.
And this is that's the point that you are making, is why it almost makes sense that the price right now, as it is so low, doesn't make sense to be used just yet. And I think just yet. Yeah. So for us, I mean, if we knew what was going on behind the scenes, and I know there were some comments about the SEC and not having real faith that they'll come out on top. I mean, look, I'm not don't call me a conspiracy theorist. call me that, because there's no way in hell that Ripple can be working and getting the sign-off from all these governments, all these banks around the world. And what is stopping them from... So you have to understand, to get everyone on board, they need to have something strategically that halts it. And so I just think this is all smoke and mirrors. And they will come out on top. And it's a situation as when they do, that flip's going to be switched. And we're going to see something like we've never seen before. But one of the questions that I want to ask, and maybe someone here can help, is when we're talking about them working on a private ledger, that private ledger that they're currently working on with the banks is because that's off the books, is that not influencing the price at all?
I'll touch on that in a second. I want to say one thing first, though. When you think of, and it's funny in finance, and I've done a bit of plumbing myself. So it's funny, all the plumbing terms that find their way into finance. And when you talk about liquidity and reference to XRP price, the way I think of XRP price going up is like using bigger pipes. So you can get more liquidity, you can get more flow through the system, through the network. If there's only a trickle of flow, quarter-inch pipes.
Exactly. That's perfect. So right now the Ripple logo free, bulbs have only tiny lines in between. But when those pipes open, the pressure can get bigger, which is volume and price and value of this price cent. That's it. That's visual version.
That's how. I'm a visual person. Vans 2019. What was the last question you said? Because what was it?
Goodness. Sorry, guys. I'm multitasking here. The question was...
Oh, give me a second. It'll pop back in my head. I was listening to you.
I've got it. So if they were working on a private ledger, why is that not influencing price? Or is that actually are what the banks are currently using? Is that influencing price? Or are we seeing that? Is that liquidity in the market just yet?
I think on a private ledger, they can use their own native assets. So once they start to, how I understand that, when they start to send from one private ledger to another, then the volume go through the XRP ledger. But on a private ledger, they can use their own created native token.
Yeah, that's how that's definitely true. That would be like ODL, but I think they also have the alternative to have like a nostro vostro traditional correspondent relationship. So liquidity and value can flow between private ledger.
And that probably was X-current previously.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's right now, but yeah, X-current.
Yeah, that's the way I think of that. Because I'm pretty sure X-current is more or less correspondent banking, just through private Ripple D ledgers that each bank operates.
It uses I don't know where I saw it, but it just uses the escrow feature, but not the escrow, but from ILP. You can make those hops with it's, how is it called? Sharper image. I know how it's in the code of XRP ledger. You can pass a payment, with encrypted. How is it?
Payment channels? Is that what you're thinking of?
Repeat. No, yeah, that only the Even you can make even 20 hops, from one, let's say, gate to another one on ILP, but only the receiver of this payment can read and sign the additional parameter which is passed through all the peers in the line. I will try to find it quickly, or I will recall it.
Well,
It's used. It's being used when you are releasing an escrow on XRP ledger, but on ILP there is the same feature, and you can pass it, to all the intermediary, routers, and only the recipient can sign that this transaction came through, and all the line of gates in between suddenly know that payment was accepted, went through, or not.
Are you talking about the multi-sign or?
No, the multi-sign.
No, it's the receipt when you.
It's an encrypted receipt which is hashed and passed with the payment, let's say, request and routing. Each guy in between can change, let's say, XRP to USD, then send USD to Euro, to I don't know, Chinese yuan or whatever, and at the end you get Bitcoin, but only your address can confirm the whole chain of swaps, and they get the response back, and they are passing it back through the chain of transaction, and the sender has 100% clarity that this payment went through or not, and everything is encrypted. I will remember. I will call it. Wait, I will go out for now. Go for reading.
That's how the sender can validate. Well, that's how the receiver can validate to the sender, and I guess that the route worked, because then if
back. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if the sender, if the receiver can't give a valid receipt, the hash or whatever, I forget. I know what you're talking about. I forget what it's called too. Then the sender knows down that route.
Yes, and no one in between can steal your escrowed for a fraction of a second, escrowed funds. So you won't be, one of the routers won't steal your packets of value, because there aren't any currency, but there is a packet, ILP packet it's called, and I know what to look for. ILP packet, and ILP packet has a property.
Yeah, that's what helps complete the circle. I think that starts with the SPSP, because there's a pre-shared key between sender and receiver, and then I think there's a key.
Maybe.
And I think there's a key between each route, like each connection in the route. And so you have like 5 hops in a transaction. Each individual hop, the sender and receiver can validate that it was completed, and then the end-to-end hop from the originating sender to the originating receiver also can validate, which I believe is what you're talking about. I forget the terminology though.
I have it. It's simple. It's crypto condition. I just looked at the LP packet, and it's crypto condition. So anyone who can solve the crypto condition can receive the intended value, which can be routed. Those routers in between can make a fee, they can charge you, 1% for exchange rate, or spread. That's basically a spread, not even a fee, but a spread between two other coins, whether they are fiat or crypto. But you will get
Yeah,
payment
that's right.
through. You will get the payment through, and the sender will have 100% sure that no one tricked, the sending value. As at least I imagine like that.
That's what it is, crypto condition. Yeah, you're right. And I think because there was a bunch of discussion when they were first making ILP, they were trying to pare down the amount of data that was passed through in an ILP packet, and I think they got it down to like 3 things. If that's what you just said, if I remember right.
It was a long time ago, but I was always wondering about this crypto condition power, because probably it's something serious. It's the same like on the web right now. You have two types of protocols. You have HTTP, which guarantees that you got your web page data in order. A lot of packets, it's common that, 5% or 6%, depending on, firewalls or corporate networks, VPNs or stuff, a lot of packets get just lost on the IP protocol. And HTTP guarantees you that all the packets came in order and 100% full. The second protocol used is UDP, which just send and forget. The server is sending. It's for Netflix is using UDP. It doesn't matter if you didn't receive all your pixels because you just can't. It won't matter much. What matters is that you have a frame rate of 60 frames, but sometimes you get glitches around the corner. It adjusts to your connection. But for everything else on the internet, everything is 100% sure that all the packets got from the server to your browser in exact order as expected. And this ILP is something like that. If it works like that, this crypto condition.
That's how HTTP worked. I think with ILP that there's both an independent per hop check, but then you also have a full round trip check from original sender to ending receiver.
It should, yeah. That would make sense. So each hop has to, add some additional data. Yeah, but I'm guessing right now. Just recall that this crypto condition was passed from gate to gate, basically, from exchange to exchange.
Yeah, as far as I know. I mean, you're pushing the limit of my technical knowledge. Like I said, I'm a finance guy, but
it should be even this protocol isn't a code itself. It's just a set of rules which XRP is implementing by the way all the time, because you can have this on XRP. You have this crypto condition. Probably it's called the same for releasing escrow. Anyone can check because I'm on the phone right now. You send the one in the transaction for releasing or closing escrow, and for creating an escrow, you have to provide this crypto condition. And only an account which can create this crypto condition can release the escrow back. As far as I remember when I was checking it last time.
Guys, I just want to say thank you very much for tonight. It's been amazing hearing the wealth of knowledge that you guys are bringing into this conversation. Unfortunately, I have to call it quits, but look forward to seeing you guys back on later in the week. So have a good night, guys.
Yeah.
Enjoy.
Thanks. I have the same. Need to.
Wonderful. Cheers, guys. Thanks.
Good. Cheers. Yeah.
Nice to
bye-bye.
hear you. Thanks.
So yeah, guys, we need to read some crypto condition related documentation. They have a lot of both ILP and XRP has a lot of documentation. So we'll find out.
I'll probably just pull the plug. I think we're about an hour and 20 in.
Yeah. Did you manage to record it or?
I believe so. As soon as I hang up, I paid an app to do it, so hopefully it worked.
All right.
But yeah, this has been a wonderful conversation again. So appreciate you guys joining in.
Yeah, thanks a lot for.
Yeah. Thanks a lot. Yeah.
See you later, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Take care, guys. Yeah.
Good evening.